The best way to use evidence in a text response essay is to integrate it seamlessly so that it blends smoothly between your words, the quotations, and then the rest of your analysis, without any sudden changes or interruption to the flow of your ideas. My name is Bernadette Tedesco, and in this lesson I'm going to be talking about upgrading your use of evidence in an essay in response to Shirley Jackson's novel, We've Always Lived in the Castle. In this lesson I'm going to be talking about upgrading your use of evidence through the way that you integrate your quotes. I'll be talking about how to upgrade your use of evidence by improving the structures and features that you use as evidence. And I'll also be talking about improving the exploration by focusing on analysis. Some of the relevant study points that I'll be covering relate specifically to planning, constructing, and editing analytical writing in relation to explicitly responding to a set topic, sustaining and developing ideas, exploring and refining your structure, and demonstrating your knowledge of a text, and demonstrating your understanding of purpose, audience, and context. This is here as a reminder of how evidence fits into the broader scheme of your body paragraph. So your evidence will always be in relation to whatever your topic sentence is, and you'll use a number of different pieces of evidence. You want to aim for about 2 or 3, and then you'll link back to your essay prompt. When you're talking about your evidence, you need to increase the quality of your work by using evidence to support your idea in a sophisticated way. So I've already covered how to use evidence and explore it, but I'm going to be talking about how to upgrade your use of it. And in particular, using it to improve the clarity and fluency of your writing by blending those quotes in. Learning how to select relevant quotes smoothly and integrate them into your writing is a skill that will take time and practice. If a quote is just dropped into a paragraph without cushioning them with your own words, it creates a broken sentence and impairs the readability and flow. It makes it hard to follow what you're saying. It's much more effective to blend quotations into your writing using your own words. For example, here is a poor integration of a quote. Come back into the world. You've done penance long enough. Helen Clark suggests that Constance may be confining herself to the house out of a deep feeling of guilt and remorse for what she allowed to happen in the Blackwood house. A good way of integrating, a really quick way of integrating your quotes, is to not start a sentence with a quote. It's better to move into it, to cushion it at the start with your own words before putting a quotation in. For example, Helen Clark states, come back into the world and you've done penance long enough, which suggests that Constance may be confining herself to the house out of a deep feeling of guilt and remorse for what she has allowed to happen in the Blackwood house. So we've blended the discussion of the quote and the quote into the one sentence by cushioning it on either side. You can even remove words by using an ellipsis, that's those 3 dots, or add and change words if needed by using square brackets. Now, if you're adding and changing words by using square brackets, you can't actually change the meaning of the quote. You can only really change like pronouns, personal pronouns, and so past, present, future tense to make it flow better into your writing. Helen Clark tells Constance to come back into the world. So this allows it to flow a little bit better because it gives it a little bit more context, and that she had done penance long enough. So it's removed that you've from the quote. It's taken away that pronoun, which makes it flow a lot more smoothly. And then the exploration is pretty much the same. Now I'm going to talk about how to integrate your quotes in a way that's a little bit more challenging but has a much better impact in terms of readability. If you can remove the quotation marks and the sentence you have written still flows properly and makes sense, then the quote has been effectively embedded. So think about it that way. Can I take out the quotation marks and the sentence still makes sense? And if you can do that, it's been effectively embedded. How to do this? The easy way to blend quotes is by saying the character says, or the text says. And that's probably the first way that you learn to do it. The text states, the character says. However, an even more sophisticated way to integrate quotes is to blend the quotes and the explanation sentence together to form one detailed sentence. So this is done by using the quote within a clause, so one section of a multi-part sentence, or by using a single word quote of a specific part. Now, if you're using a single word quote, you need to be using a key word. So a single word quote wouldn't be a really generic word like father or a character's name. It has to be a specific key word that you're using. Here's a basic example. Despite prompting from Helen Clark, Constance's continued self-confinement suggests a deep feeling of guilt and remorse for what she allowed to happen in the Blackwood house. What is that about? Despite prompting from Helen Clark, Constance's continued self-confinement suggests a deep feeling of guilt and remorse for what she allowed to happen in the Blackwood house. So if we have this basic example of an idea that I want to get across, despite prompting from Helen Clark, Constance's continued self-confinement suggests a deep feeling of guilt and remorse for what she allowed to happen in the Blackwood house. I think about how can I add the quote in without interrupting the flow of that, so that it's just an addition to what's already been said. For example, despite prompting from Helen Clark to come back into the world, so I've just added in what it is that Helen Clark prompted, Constance's continued self-confinement was her act of penance, suggesting a deep feeling of guilt and remorse. So that continued self-confinement was her act of penance. The key word there from the quote that I've used is penance. And see how that's a really strong specific word? And so in that context, a single word quote works, suggesting a deep feeling of guilt and remorse for what she allowed to happen in the Blackwood house. So I've used an existing idea and I've thought about where can I put those bits of the quotes that are really necessary to prove what I'm trying to say. Start by thinking about what you want your sentence to look like without the quote, and then substitute parts of the sentence with parts of the quote. I'd like you to have a go at doing this. So with this essay topic, We've Always Lived in the Castle examines the consequences of isolation and confinement. I want you to have a go at rewriting the following sentences so that the quotation is integrated. We have the quote here that I want integrated. An unhealthy environment. Helen Clark said, a child should be punished for wrongdoing, but she should be made to feel that she is still loved. And I want to integrate that evidence with the idea. Mary Cat's ostracism by her parents was obvious even to outsiders like Helen Clark. So I've got my statement. What parts of the quote prove what I'm trying to say? How can I narrow that quote down to make it blend smoothly, and where would it fit best? Good luck. Okay, so how'd you go? Remember, these were our original sentences. We had the quote here and we had the statement. So I will start with the statement and think about where can I put substituting things in. Mary Cat's ostracism by her parents was obvious even to outsiders like Helen Clark, who observed that it was an unhealthy environment. So that's the part of the quote that is really key, that even Helen Clark thinks that the way Mary Cat was treated was not right. And that despite the need for punishment, a child should still be made to feel loved. So the rest of it has been summarised, paraphrased, and just the key bit of the quote, still should be made that she is still loved. So I've just picked out the absolute essential parts of the quote and I've blended them into the existing sentence. All right, so in this part of our upgrade, I want to look at improving structures and features as evidence. For example, if we were going to use setting as one of those structures and features, an example might be the village is isolated from the cities and towns, and so that's evidence that there is confinement and isolation. And an analysis of that would be that the setting the village in isolation from the rest of the country causes the citizens to become small-minded and mean-spirited. So I've analysed how being isolated causes, what the consequences of that isolation is for the villagers. Remember, evidence refers to any specific example from the text, not just quotes. So the setting, for example, is a piece of evidence. You can combine quotations and structures and features for a richer analysis. So you can combine both of these types of evidence to get a really rich and sophisticated analysis. So if we were going to use a quote as evidence, the villagers belonged here and the village was the only proper place for them. So that's something that Merricat says about the villagers. And I want to combine both of these bits of evidence together, the setting and the quotes. Setting the village in isolation from the rest of the country causes the citizens to become small-minded and mean-spirited, suggesting that they belonged in a confined space and that the village was the only proper place for them. Yeah, so I've used proof that the village was isolated and also proof of the impact of that isolation by combining setting and quotes as evidence. Another way that you can improve and upgrade your use of evidence is by focusing on analysis. So when you're looking at how you explore your evidence, you want to avoid simply retelling the plot. Whilst there is some need for justified retelling, at times you want to keep it to a minimum. Assume that your audience knows the text well enough to be able to understand the moments that you're referring to. You're referring to them to bring them to the forefront, to remind your audience that they're there. You're not bringing them to the essay in order to retell what happened. It's important to know the difference between retelling and analysis. Justified retelling is when this is evidence that summarizes the plot. It serves a purpose and enhances your essay in terms of demonstrating knowledge, but it will not suffice as your evidence to support your ideas. It's just the key necessary bit that you need to include to provide some context and cushioning to what you're saying. You need to know what retelling is and how not to do it in preparation for your essay. Actually using evidence to analyse is when you unpack and discuss the significance of that evidence or that moment in relation to your idea. So you're not just saying that it happened in the text, but you're explaining how it was used to create meaning and why the author used that moment. So rather than just using quotes to say that something happened in the text, you need to use the quotes to prove how it was used and how it created meaning, how it proves your idea. So you really want to find that happy place between quotes and evidence, a little bit of cushioning of retell, and that focus on analysis. That's the moment you want to focus on. Ask yourself, do I understand the difference between justified retelling and analysis supported by evidence? Can I replace the retelling with real analysis? So what ideas are coming across through this piece of evidence rather than just what happened in the play or text? Think about, can I replace this retelling with real analysis? So can I focus on the idea that the evidence is showing about society rather than just what happened in the novel? Please have a go at this activity. Which one of these examples uses evidence, so not for retell, but for analysis? Hopefully you were able to identify D as the correct response. I'm going to read through them and explain why they don't fit. Merricat was always sent away from the family because she has done something wrong, especially at dinner time. That's me just repeating something that occurred in the text. She was sent away from the family because she did something wrong at dinner time. There's no real analysis here. I haven't unpacked any idea. So that one is incorrect. Merricat was always sent away from the family because she has done something wrong, especially at dinner time. She was always being sent to bed without her supper. So we've added a quote in here, but that quote hasn't actually been analysed. It's the same statement up here, just with a quote attached to prove that this retelling actually occurred. Merricat was always sent away from the family because she had done something wrong, especially at dinner time. The family's position at the dinner table symbolised their position of power within the household. Okay, so we do have analysis, but the analysis isn't relevant to the example that's being told. So an example of her being sent away from the dinner table, I haven't made the connection. I've jumped from one point, she's always getting in trouble and being sent away at dinner time, to a second point, the family's position at the dinner table symbolised their position of power within the household. So it's not really a good example of analysis. If I wanted to use this point, I might have to say something like, Merricat's absence from the dinner table was significant because she was always being sent away. Yeah, so I haven't really explained how their positions at the dinner table are relevant. And there's also no quotation there to support it. I've just used retell and then some analysis that's not connected. D, however, does all those things. Because Merricat was always being sent to bed without her supper, so quote, it is clear that her isolation and confinement from the rest of the family caused her to feel rejected and betrayed by those who were meant to love her. We can see here that I have explained how this quote proves an idea that is relevant to the quote. So what are some of our key takeaways? Firstly, you want to blend your quotes naturally so that your writing still flows properly and makes sense. You want to combine both structures and features and quotations for a really rich analysis, and you want to actually analyze your evidence and explore it rather than just simply retelling what happens in the story. Please join me in our next lesson where I talk about how to write a conclusion.